So this review is for MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. It's not. This isn't about the demo slash closed beta. This isn't about everything that happened before that. All that's pretty well documented. So I don't need to rehash all that information. We're just going to be strictly looking at the game itself. I've streamed over 21 hours of gameplay. Along with that, I did have some offline gameplay that wasn't recorded. So I have a pretty good idea of what direction the game is going in. There are some positives. There are a lot of negatives. And this is not an opinion. This is just a fact as it's presented by the game itself. Through playing it, these are things that have popped up and are blatantly apparent. So, like I said, this isn't a matter of opinion. This isn't a matter of discussing whether it is or is not. I have video footage to document most of the things that are going to be covered today. Some of the stuff is not really worth clipping a video of. So those particular aspects you won't really see. But if you do play the game or if you watch any streamer, you'll see that in their gameplay footage. When I do mention it. So first and foremost, I'm not all that right off the bat should kind of give you an idea of where we're going to go with this review. The next part of it is that I am not going to be comparing this to MechWarrior 4 Mercenaries. Okay, that's in the past. That's history. That's 17 years ago. That game, if you literally took that game and recreated it with today's technology, it would be better. Period. That's not what this game is. This game I am going to be comparing mostly to PGI's previous product, MechWarrior Online, which they are marketing as a sister game to be run side by side with MechWarrior 5. And along with that, also, there will be a little bit of comparison between MechWarrior 5 and Battletech, because that is another title within the Battletech universe that did release recently. So, there may also be a little bit of a comparison between MechWarrior 5 and some of the other Unreal Engine games that are out right now. But that may not really come into play too much. We're going to try to focus mainly on MechWarrior 5. So first of all, we're going to go ahead and get started with the fact that MechWarrior 5 does not have a opening cinematic. A lot of the previous MechWarrior titles did. As soon as you launch the game up, you ran into it. They chose not to do a generic intro movie. They chose to move that intro over to the campaign for some reason. So we'll go ahead and get this fired up real quick because we're going to be covering some of the stuff that's obvious initially, that do kind of create a little bit of issue here. So like I said, there is no intro movie. You just come in, boom, you're here at the splash screen. The first thing that you will notice as you start to navigate through the game is the menus, the user interface. It's very generic. It's very simple, black and white and grayscale, right? It's not there is no borders around the boxes, nothing. They kept it very simple. It's functional. Doesn't make it look pretty. That does contrast with MechWarrior Online. Visually, the user interface is much more appealing. So like I said, as you can see here, black and white on the dialog boxes. There's a picture tucked in here. There's graphics in the background, but all of the options for the user interface are extremely generic. You come into and this goes for every menu. This is not just for one particular menu or another. They did color code the weapon systems inside of the mech bay, but once again, it still falls in line with a very basic, very simplistic menu design. So definitely nothing stands out on there at all. Also, right now, as you're watching this, it is scaled down for Twitch, but I am running this on a 2K monitor. Okay, and this menu is not scalable at all. It does not change the size. The size basically stays the same. It's kind of big in your face. That may be something that they could change in the future with just a simple slider, or they can go in and decide to make some changes, themselves per resolution that's being used. But once again, that puts the ball back in PGI's court. The next thing that we do run into, as you can see here, you can save loadouts inside of this instant action menu. You can't save these loadouts in the campaign, and that's it's kind of weird. You even if you do instant action, you do some testing. Let's say you go through and you build different variants that you want. You can have those saved as presets in the instant action menu, but you can't utilize those in the campaign. You have to build them all manually. So we'll get switched over to that real quick. I'll show that in just a second. And then we'll also go into, along the same lines of those presets, that also comes into the color presets as well, which, you have to go through and individually pick each one of your colors, your primary, your secondary, and your tertiary, which, once again, it's very time consuming. It's actually quite annoying. You want to screw around and play with different colors and see how they look, and maybe you want to change your colors just to give yourself a little more immersion and change the colors based on the map that you're dropping in, right? Like, let's say you're dropping in a desert
Time
biome.
to rocket from the Delta to the DMZ.
And you want to go with some of those desert colors. That is not an easy quick change option. You have to go in for each individual mech and each individual color to get those changed over. Let's see here. It shouldn't have popped up, but it did. Once again, too, as you can see here, it's taking a pretty good clip for this to load. The minimum specs don't really mention anything about it. They just tell you need a certain amount of free space. The recommended specifications, however, do go into a little more detail. And let's see if we can pull it up here. Okay, so according to their website, like I said, they just say for the minimum specs that a hard drive with 55 gigabytes of free space is fine. That is not the case. They are then suggesting under the recommended systems. What the hell's going on here?
Weapon. Mission abort. Repeat. Mission abort. Rendezvous for evac at nav point Delta.
We'll go ahead and close out of this real quick. Oh, okay. It's automatically loading me in here because this is a campaign mission, so I can't really show that right now. But if you go into it, you can check it yourself, and that's fine. The biggest thing that you come into with the recommended specs, like I said, is that they are recommending a solid state drive. And so if you're not running a solid state drive, you will notice the slowness when it comes to loading, especially when it comes to all of the procedurally generated maps. It does slow things down quite a bit. They also have a pretty significant jump from 8 gigs to 16 gigs, and they're recommending a GTX 1070 on there as a recommended requirement for the game. I run a 1080, and I still have some lagging that goes on, as far as it just trying to process, what it's seeing on there. So back to some of the other things. That's kind of the basic things about the game that like, as far as menu goes, as far as graphical user interface, as far as like functionality on that end, you don't have it. There are a lot of things that are missing in the game. However, based on what PGI has stated for their timeline for the game, you don't really expect certain things to be in there. So that's a little bit more understandable here. So, like I said, when you come into the Paint Mech section, we can show it here from the Instant Action menu. You can select your patterns, and you can select your colors, but there's no way to save it. You don't have any options to save. You don't have any options to load. That is definitely missing, and is a little bit problematic. So, that they should give us that option. We should be able to save multiple color patterns, and in combination with the pattern itself. But like I said, they don't have it. The next thing that we're going to go into is co-op mode. Now, co-op is not available from the start of this game. The game is advertised as a co-op game. However, that is not the case. And I'll show you here real quick from one of my videos. As you can see over here, under the pending transmission, there was a section that popped up that said that co-op was available. We'll go ahead and skip through it real quick so you can actually see that. And I went back and checked in my broadcast to see when that did become available. Okay, that did not become unlocked until 2 hours into the game. So I had to go in and play some missions in order to get that. And even when co-op was unlocked, you did not have 4 mechs to start with. You only had 3. It was the Javelin, the Centurion, and the Jenner. So, like I said, it was one of those things to where with co-op, the feature is there once you unlock it. And I don't know necessarily yet if that is tied specifically to the save. So if you have multiple saves with different merc companies that you've created, if one of them has it unlocked and the other one doesn't, as to whether or not that's affected. I have not tested that out yet. But the other thing, too, that really kind of bugged me that I saw with co-op play, now I don't have a clip of this yet. That clip, that's something that you can see for yourself during online gameplay, is that when you're playing single player, if you have lance mates and your mech gets destroyed, right? I'm not saying you get killed, but your mech gets destroyed, it's instantly mission over. If you're playing a mission in co-op and you die, it's not over. So there's some continuity there that's missing. There's no reason why you eject out of your mech, right? That your lance mates can't continue the mission and you can't complete it in single player mode. But if that's the way that they wanted to do it, that was their design choice. I don't know why they did it, but that was something that they were looking at and focusing on. So let's go ahead. We'll just back out here just as the background. We'll just have it set up. We'll start looking at a couple of other aspects now. The next thing that we have is some inconsistencies as far as ingress and egress out of the battlefield. You saw it earlier when I just aborted that mission. There was no... We were already in the dropship, but it just faded out. I noticed that too. It didn't matter if you were mid-mission. You could be far away from a potential LZ and you abort. It does not force you to return to the dropship. It just fades out and then the mission's aborted. As far as entering into a mission, there's 2 things that typically happen. One, you either enter the mission via dropship or you just magically spawn in on the planet surface and it fades in and there you are with your lance mates on the planet surface. And that goes the same way too for egress and getting out of those conflicts. Either a dropship will come in and you have to go to that dropship to be for exfil, or you end up it just fades out. It says mission completed, fade out, and there you go. Once again, there's a lack of continuity with that. There's no reason why you can't drop in and then have to go back to the dropship for every mission to get out. And same thing too, if you abort, you're still in the mission. You got to make it to the dropship to get the hell out of there, because that's kind of the idea, the broader idea behind the combat in this game. It's not, hey, you're stationed in this area and you're just protecting this one part on one planet. That's not the way combat's set up in this game. So there needs to be some continuity on that. The next thing, as I was saying, certain features not available. I kind of got irked at first when I didn't see ECM, BAP, tag lasers, targeting computers, cool shot or coolant flush or coolant pods, which are part of the BattleTech universe, and they especially coolant flush has always been a part of the previous MechWarrior games, and it's just not in here. Now, as far as the tech goes relating to the tag, ECM, BAP, and targeting computers, it does not fall in line with the timeline that they have presented. So, as you could see, let me see, where's it at? On their website, I believe it was. That's about the launch date. I don't actually think they specified it here. It may have been during the AMAs with Russ that they specified the timeline. But the reality is that that equipment is not available until after 3044. TAG was recovered by the Federated Commonwealth in 3044. The Capellan Confederation also recovered ECM and BAP in 3045. And then the Federated Sons developed their own targeting computer for the Inner Sphere in 3062. So this is according to Sarna.net. I just went on real quick and just browsed through it to see if I can get some more information on it. So it's understandable why those certain packages aren't available in game. However, it's also, come to my attention, especially from other streamers, that they were a little confused as to why pulse lasers were in the game, at this point in time. Because according to the timeline, they wouldn't have been available either. But PGI chose to put them in. So there, like I said, there's that continuity there, right? Being accurate to the timeline. If you're bringing this game out and saying, hey, I'm gonna bring it to be, accurate to the timeline of, BattleTech, then you need to do it fully. Now, I understand if you didn't have the pulse lasers in there, that limits the amount of weapon systems that you use, but I put over 20 hours in and I haven't used pulse lasers. I found some, I could have bought some, but I'm not using them. So it's not really necessary to have them. The next thing that we ran into while going through it is looking at the mech chassis. Okay, so one of the things that PGI chose to do with MechWarrior Online is they had a portrait for each variant. This is very apparent with the Hunchback. And I'm going to show you real quick what PGI had stated about MechWarrior 5 when I asked them about it. So, actually, we'll go to the mech selection here. We're going to focus on the Hunchback because it's easiest to see. As you can see here, you've got the 4G, all the variants, but every single one of them is running the 4G portrait for it. Now, according to PGI, they are only running one portrait per chassis. They're not doing it per variant. So during the stream, I decided to go ahead and fire up MechWarrior Online while I was streaming MechWarrior 5 to take a look at it. Okay? And as you can see here, right, the 4J does have its own portrait. The 4SP has its own portrait. The 4P, has its own portrait with, the lasers in the shoulder. So you have an older game that they created that has the individualized portraits per variant, but then they don't bring it over for each of the individual variants in MechWarrior 5. Now, granted, these portraits were supposedly pictures or screenshots in game. That's fine. Nobody really cares whether or not they're drawn or they're a screenshot in game. Nobody cares. Is it nice that they're a rendered piece of art? Yeah, that's nice. That's cool. But if you're going to do it all the way. Don't do it half-assed. Right? Make all of them, those custom pieces of art. I don't know why they weren't done. I don't know what their decision was behind it. I don't know if they plan on changing it. I have no idea. But that was something that I noticed during gameplay that kind of threw me off. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into some of the voice acting on here. Okay, this was definitely apparent, especially during the initial part of the campaign. People want to call it the tutorial. I'm not listing it as that because it's not labeled as a tutorial and it's not separate from the campaign. You have to complete it. You have to go through it. So it's part of the campaign. So just listen to the gate, the pattern that these guys talk in, and listen to how slow it actually is.
Was made to have a good balance between speed and firepower. All we have to do now is find out if the weapon systems work.
They're powered down, yo.
Boy, what do you mean if the weapons work? You know how long I spent stripping each one of those components and putting them back together again?
It's just a little bit slow. It's just a little bit slow, and it doesn't make sense.
Let's go shoot some stuff. Follow me.
Okay, that brings us to the next part. And before we move to that, though, just keep that in mind. When you listen to some of the voice acting that goes through, the speed at which they actually talk, they don't talk like normal human beings. They're not having normal conversation. And I do tend to talk fast, but for me, when I heard it, it just threw me off. It just clicked with me, and I was like, wait a minute, I've been listening to people talk all my life, and there's just something a little bit off with that. They should be talking a little bit more fluently, and they're not. The next part that does lead into is it leads into discrepancies in the voice acting. So, as he said in here for the mission, follow me, right? Now watch what happens.
When I was your age, I once slammed the hunchback I was piloting right into my instructor's javelin. Oh man, was he pissed.
Captain Mid.
Cool story, bro.
Yeah, go ahead, Rihanna.
Thought you'd want
So
to
he says,
all
follow
repairs
me,
to the leopard
right?
weapon
Says, follow me. He doesn't leave. He doesn't move. He just stands still, right? So not only is that either a failure in the programming or a failure in the voice acting, it's one of the two, right? Or both. But either way, you don't end up following him. He doesn't leave. He doesn't take off. He doesn't move, okay? And then we end up running into another situation to where inside of that supposed tutorial, right? We run into a situation where if you make certain changes in game, okay, they aren't picked up by the game itself because the voice acting is too specific in some areas. So some of you have seen this video already, but we'll go ahead and play it again.
Take note of your ammo levels. Always remember to manage your reserves.
And before we continue, the way I have the current weapon group set is that my AC-10 along with my medium lasers are set in weapon group 1. My LRM-10 is set into weapon group 2. This is the way I set it the moment I got into the mech, because every time I get into the mech for the first time, I'm automatically changing those weapon groups to coincide with how I play, with that particular build out. So just keep that in mind.
Shells in the middle of a firefight. It could be your last one.
Dude, that was pretty bad, Drago.
Group 2. Fire
Okay.
when ready.
My lasers are not mapped to weapon group 2.
Alright, that's good enough. Those lasers generate significant heat. You can see the temperature readout next to your armor and structure display. All weapons generate heat when fired. You overheat your mech during a firefight, and it could...
So, as it was saying, right? He's like, your weapons are mapped into weapon group 2, but they weren't because I had changed them, right? So instead of just saying something like, fire your lasers at a target, right? It didn't say that. It was just fire weapon group 2. So at that point, I was like, okay, this is a little bit weird. It threw up a flag. So then it leads on into the next part, which it kind of, honestly, it started definitely making me pay very much attention to what was going on, okay?
Keep that in mind. Now for the fun stuff. Long-range missiles are set to weapon group 3. The target lock has been disabled for the moment, but never mind that. Just go ahead and fire at will.
Nobody obviously told them to go generic with the voice acting. This is what I'm talking about. I changed those weapon groups. So as a result, the voice acting's now off. They're like, oh, your lasers are grouped into weapon group 2. No, they're not. Oh, yeah, your LRM's grouped to weapon group 3. No, they're not. So at this point, my LRMs weren't in weapon group 3. And see, I just pressed the third mouse button to represent weapon group 3, and it triggered it. It had to trigger it that way. So as a result of the voice acting not also matching, it makes them look stupid, really. Not only that, there are some programming issues because the programming wasn't looking for you to fire the LRMs. It was looking for the button press, right? So there's an issue not just with the voice acting, but with the programming as well on the back end. And this really did come to light with this next part here, where basically I start looking at the target and trying to target it and then shoot it with the LRMs, which I had mapped to Weapon Group 2. Okay. Destroy the drone with the LRM. Now look, okay, hold on. It says destroy the drone with your LRM, right? My LRM is assigned to Weapon Group 2. Weapon Group 2 is my motherfucking mouse button. Right-clicking it, it is not fucking working. I have officially just broke it. At this point, the reason why I said I officially just broke it was because I didn't have any of the weapons in Weapon Group 3. And the LRMs weren't there either. So I tried to do what I did previously to progress the conversation, right? It just wanted me to shoot Weapon Group 3 maybe. So I pressed Weapon Group 3. It still didn't work. So at this point in time, until I went, which you'll hear it in a second, I manually switched over and keyed in the LRMs into Weapon Group 3 to fire them. The game wasn't going to progress. Jesus fucking Christ. So there we go. I just switched them over. Then I could fire it. Now it progresses. So like I said, that's the reason why I was paying a lot of attention to this one particular clip. And I showed this clip to a lot of people because it just gives you a little bit of insight into the programming on the back end by PGI, right? And even though this may have just been something that was thrown together real quick at the end, which it possibly could have, right? It needed to be looked at, and it directly reflects the programming throughout the game, because then you start to question other things that happen, right? And you start questioning also when other events come up and you're like, well, I remember that issue happened before. Is this something else that is a result of the bad programming on the back end? I don't know, right? So it leads you to start asking questions about certain things that ordinarily you wouldn't have to ask those questions about, right? And then going into, once again, just another conversation. This is a generic voice acting conversation. It felt just off.
Hey there, Gov. Oh yeah, we finally got a name for these bastards who've been chasing us down. Black Bloody Inferno, right? Well, that's a load of bollocks, isn't it?
Nobody
Black
talks
Inferno
like
is?
that.
It's bloody smoke, mate. All right then. Nice chat. Gonna get back to work now.
Now, I've heard other people also, critique the voice acting, but certain things just get over exaggerated. I've met a lot of people, from the UK and from Europe and in a lot of different areas, and especially after playing online. And I have never heard anyone talk like that, right? It's like basically if you asked an American to do a British accent and talk about stuff, that would be like something that they came up with. That's what it feels like. It feels forced, and it doesn't even flow correctly, right? And this is supposed to be in the 31st century, right? The language would have progressed by then. Okay, it would have progressed more. So it just sounded really stupid, really clunky. It just did not sound right at all. And then of course that leads over into the enemy radios, part of the voice acting, which, quite honestly, it speaks for itself on here. First off, there are 3 AC. It may not actually be on this clip. That may be a bad clip, but that's fine. The enemy voice acting is extremely distorted. Okay. Anybody who's watched the streams, I don't have to show it right now, but I was planning on doing it. But this was actually the next clip which I needed to show. The enemy voice acting is extremely distorted. And with it being extremely distorted, it's almost just painful to listen to, because you're like, I'm sorry. When it comes to radio communications, like it can be staticky, right? But it just sounds like this is what the bad guys sound like. So because these are the bad guys, this is the way we'll make them sound. And it's just really distorted, and it's just not appealing. They didn't need to do it. They could have just, had them use their normal voices, unless they were reusing voice actors, in which case, obviously they needed to try to make it change a little bit. But they could have changed the pitch as well through an audio manipulation program. They didn't necessarily need to bring in another voice actor for them. It's very, very rough. But this, anyways, that was kind of the end of the voice acting that I really want to cover. Don't want to stay too much longer on it. We'll move over into the next part here, which I did notice. Like I said, this is still fairly early on. And what I wanted to show here, actually, go ahead and pause it. And we're going to go in and we're going to slow it down a little bit. Okay. Boom, right there. I saw it for the first time. Okay. And it's this. You have enemy target HUD markers in the cutscenes that they created. They weren't even bothered to remove them. Now, I didn't notice them at first. It was something that I noticed afterwards. So as it continued, right? It switches back over to them. Boom, there it is again, right? Just sitting here in the middle of the picture, you can actually see them through the king crab. And this is what really caught my eye, and that's why I noted it the first time. They didn't even bother to remove the HUD markers, to get rid of them. It's like, come on, if you're going to have these cutscenes in here, did you review it? Did anybody review these things? Like, did they even have a QA department that goes in and just checks, like, minor shit, right? So that kind of irked me a little bit. But this goes into a broader sort of scheme, right? And that is, it's not anything major. They're minor issues, but the minor issues keep stacking up. And they're going to continue stacking up, and we're going to go ahead and cover them, and we're going to keep going through it. Once again, another thing that got covered were the NPCs, right? The NPCs, they stay pretty much stationary, okay? These are the fixed positions. You see them at the beginning of the game, they'll be there the whole time. They will not change. Let me go ahead and speed this back up. Okay? The other thing, too, is that they don't track. They're not looking at you. They don't follow you. They don't try to have a normal conversation with you. Nothing. They just sit there in their fixed positions. They sway a little bit. They move their mouth. That's it. There's nothing additional. No additional programming went in it. You know, if I went downstairs to talk to the mechanic, he'd probably be in that exact same spot because that's just the way they did the programming, right? I'm trying to have a conversation with the person. I go into the other room. And it keeps switching back and forth, right, on the comms. It's like, you're close to me, I'll talk to you in a normal voice, which increases in loudness as you get near me. Or I'll talk to you over comms. It was just like, what is this, man? You know, like, at least have them interact with you a little bit. If you want to stick to using comms, that's fine. She can talk on comms. That's not that big of a deal. But then at that point, if she's talking on comms, her physical character does not even need to be there. Her physical character does not need to be there, and she could have went strictly on comms. There was no need for it. But as a result, it becomes a joke, right? So, and like I said, most of the NPCs are like that throughout the game. There is, going into the next part here, which kind of follows along that, comes into the hologram itself, right? Some people have mentioned this. Nice hologram that doesn't talk.
About Nikolai, he was a good
with his
man,
mouth.
and an even better pilot he'll be.
See, they decided to go ahead and make the NPCs talk and animate their mouth. This is supposed to be a hologram. It's just a stationary picture. That's it. It's like, come on, right? Just a little more effort here. A little more effort. It's just a little bit more, you know, it shows that you actually cared about the game. And I'm not saying that you don't. It just shows that, like, when you start looking at all of these things, it just makes an experienced gamer who goes through and has been playing games for a long time look at it and go, they just didn't care. They didn't care to clean this shit up. Right? So that goes into, we're gonna move into another part here. One of the other things that they really kind of boasted about was the IK for the mechs right? The mech's feet obviously being attached to the terrain, or at least mimicking the terrain as if it was actually standing on it. As you can see here, that was not the case. The mech itself is floating over the terrain. It's not even close. Now, this isn't necessarily along the normal path, right? This is a jump jet equipped mech, so I can go pretty much wherever I want. So unless the area, the terrain is relatively flat, I don't think that this really even comes into play like that. You can't, the IK clearly here is not working. So that is something that they will need to tweak later on. They will need to fix. Moving into, we're going to start going through these kind of quick as far as other issues that I found, right? Little details here and there, okay? You come into a mission complete screen, right? And when you come into the mission complete screen, go ahead and watch on this right-hand side here, watch this repair arm and watch what it does. Just clips through the wall. There's no opening, there's no door, nothing. It just goes right through it. And that's not just with this one particular mech. That happens with some of the other mechs as well. So as you're going through the game, you see that constantly. That's something that is there pretty regularly. Okay. Another thing that we ran across, it almost seems like they didn't have a military advisor. Somebody they could talk to. Canada has vets that they could have talked to get a little bit of insight, especially when it comes to military equipment, and they should have done it. There's ranks here that are listed in their name, right? I'm the commander, captain, lieutenant, so on and so forth. Those are not directly correlated to the skill level, right? So this captain, who's a low skill level, has a higher rank than this lieutenant, who has a significantly higher skill level. All right, they could have added that one extra little bit that is saying, okay, well, we'll say from 1 to 10 points in skill, maybe there'll be a recruit or a corporal or whatever, and then from 10 to 20, we'll say there'll be a sergeant, and then from 20 to 30, we'll say that there'll be a lieutenant, switch over into commissioned officer ranks, right? But they just didn't even do that. They didn't put the effort in once again to even try to mimic that, and along with that, speaking on the same lines of military, advice, really, I got irked by the radar that was in this game. Radar has been around since the 1930s. It's been around for a long time. And even at that time, it could not only pinpoint range, but also detection at almost 30 kilometers. Okay? And this is what we get in return. Okay? I physically see them. I put my reticle on them. And here you go. So at about 800 meters is when they finally even show up as enemies on the HUD. They weren't even on the little radar here because the radar range was off. And even if the radar was enlarged, because the HUD icon wasn't on them and showing that they were an enemy marker, it wouldn't have showed up on the radar. So like that kind of irked me as well. Like I said, it just showed just like how blatantly off it was, right? These guys are not obscured by terrain. They're out in the open, in the sky. It's a flight of 3, for fuck's sake, right? You've got two bigger VTOLs, and then you've got a smaller one actually to the right. So it should have easily been able to pick them up, and it didn't, and they didn't show it. I don't know why. I don't know why it did that. I don't know why they chose to do that, but it definitely aggravated me. So this also going to another point about targeting and mechs showing up on your HUD. I ran into this little doozy here, and we'll go ahead and let the video play out for itself.
Target acquired.
Whoa, hold on. That was weird.
Destroyed.
Let's see if it'll do it again. Yeah. Look, I'm hitting R. I'm hitting R right now. Nothing. Okay. That's what it is. I was holding shift. If you hold shift, which unlocks your arms. basically, I didn't finish the statement there, but if you're holding shift while approaching an area and enemies pop up, if you're continuing to hold shift to keep your arms unlocked, and you press R, it will not work. You cannot target the enemy targets. You have to let go of shift in order to target. And that just happened to come up while I was playing, and I noticed that. And shift R doesn't do anything in this game, so there's no reason why it wouldn't try to just interpret it as two separate commands. I can understand as far as key combinations go, the computer itself can limit that. But if that was the case, then they should have just changed the options, and they should have said, okay, we'll go into the menu and have arms be unlocked as a default. You don't have to worry about pressing the key in order to unlock your keys or whatever the case is. But this is mapping similar to what MechWarrior Online is, and they're not thinking about what would happen during an active combat situation. If you're trying to shoot at a VTOL that's, that your torso can't hit, but your arms can, and then you're like, okay, I want to hit him, and then as soon as you hit him, you're still holding on to shift when you go back to look for other targets, and you're trying to target something else, right? And this is especially the case when it comes to LRMs. You may be trying to hold that lock while you're running it to the left. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're heading straight on, you're running to the left, and you've got that reticle facing left with an unlocked arm, and you're trying to target different stuff while you're running. You cannot maintain the arm unlocked while trying to target, and so that is a pain in the ass. We also went and checked. Kel came into the stream, and Kel said, "Hey, I don't think the temperature is affecting the mechs, in the biome, right?" Picked up a Hunchback 4P. It's running all medium lasers. It's a pretty beefy build. So you go ahead and watch his temperature gauge here. Yeah, see, this is what they were talking about, right? You camper, you can stand in the lava. And there's no additional heat. Oh, look at that. It's so cold. So even with firing, right, the two weapon groups on there, you saw that the heat generation was not that high. It was not that high at all. And once again, it didn't affect it. It just did not affect it. Next thing I noticed while we were going through, I wanted to go ahead and do manual saves. I tend to do manual saves on any kind of game that goes into a first person or a campaign, solo campaign. So anyway, we're going to... When you get in here and you start saving, this is some of the information that gets saved. So you could see here, right? It's saving the time elapsed, what your current reputation status is, the time, so on and so forth, right? So it saves it, and you could see. Let me just take it back a little bit because it's moving quick. That it was a manual save. This is when it happened. This is what you named it, reputation, so on and so forth, right? So I go through. I'm just saving the game. That's it. I go ahead and do a new save. I wasn't sure if it had saved or not because it still said I was Reputation 4, and I knew I wasn't Reputation 4, right? Because I'm clearly Reputation 7. So I go ahead and set that as current. I go to save it again, right? And you can see here, this is where it definitely comes in. These look almost identical until you get to this, and they were both saved 15 seconds apart. So there's something going on with the save information on here. I don't know if that affects the save file. I don't know if I came in and tried to load this Reputation 4, if it would try to revert it back or what. I didn't get into that testing. I didn't really care to get into that testing too much, but there was something going on with the save file, and that's something that should definitely be paid attention to while going through it. Another big thing, the dropship textures. You're constantly going in and out of dropships on this game. And one of the things that I noticed was on the dropship itself, over here on the sides, and you'll be able to see it really clearly here, their textures are missing. They're just missing, right? I mean, this is a high traffic area. This is an area that you're going to come out of, of these dropships every time, and it just wasn't there, right? You could see directly through it. And you could tell that the texture was missing because it was clear and transparent on one side, and the moment you went to the other side, you saw the outer hull. So those textures were definitely missing, and every time you drop in a dropship, you can find those. So those were there at the time. Another thing, as we were kind of going through, I thought it was kind of weird. The map does not have any major identifiers on it. It does not show which region belongs to which house, right? Just a simple emblem marker. People can recognize that and know which one it is. Right now, unless you've played BattleTech, you don't know, necessarily who red or blue is, or who green is, or purple, or yellow, orange. You don't know. And they just didn't even put it there. There's not even a key to say this is for, House Davian, or this is for Merrick, or this is for, Carita. They didn't put that there. It's just not there. It's just another bit of laziness, right? Like, everybody knows ever since you're in elementary school and you go through and you learn about maps have a key. There's no key on this. And even if they chose not to use the key and they chose to put emblems on the specific areas, they didn't do it. It's just one extra little thing that's just not there. So it doesn't make sense. Next thing we're going to go into is we're going to go into some blown up components. These components, as you can see there, I don't even really have to say it. It's pretty self-explanatory. The right torso on this 4P got blown up, and as a result, the equipped lasers are floating in space. Now, according to PGI, their patch that they released today is supposed to address this, so we'll be keeping an eye out for it, definitely in the future. But it shows up in the mech bay. It shows up in-game, actually, while you're running around in-game, and in a number of other areas. It's in the store as well. It's just like, it just shows it like this. And it's something that happens, but it was just one more thing. Like I said, one more little thing that adds to the list of stuff that we're having to deal with and stuff that we're seeing. Another thing that I ran into was that some of the mechs weren't actually available when they said they were. On here, you can see on the left-hand side, it says that there's a rare mech Highlander for sale. Okay? Well, I go ahead and click on it. And then when I click on it and I go through the inventory, when you click on that icon, it's supposed to take you directly to that mech. It's supposed to, but it doesn't. So then when I scroll through on here, there is no Highlander listed. So even though it said that there was a rare mech, even though it had it listed as a Highlander being a rare mech, it is not in the shop. It's just not there. It's something that definitely needs to be addressed and fixed, because if you're expecting a rare mech to be in a shop and you spend the C-bills to get over to that shop just to find out the mech's not there, there's going to be people that are pissed off about that. Another issue that we ran into was floating terrain. Now, I went back and looked at this, and there was something here. I don't know if at one point it was just buildings or what. Like, there was some trash down here. I don't know if it was like old blown up buildings or what it was, but it looked kind of weird. Like, you see this right here, like this blown up stuff. I don't know what it was. Either way, these items were floating, and I don't know if it happened during that procedural generation or if it was something that blew up. But either way, that was there. It was present. So obviously, I had to jot that down, and we're going to keep going. During the demo testing, there were some issues regarding the cockpit and the environment. Now, I don't know. This is directly related to the sun. Okay, this particular issue. And while I was sitting here, you could see these rays basically coming in because the sun's positioned right over here. Okay, and if you look, they kind of track back directly to it. So I don't know if this was supposed to be something to do with the glare. I don't know if this was supposed to be intentional or what it was. But at first, when I first saw it, I thought I was getting shot at with some small lasers. That's what I really thought. And I was like, there's nothing there. This is invisible. What the fuck? But it was popping up on both sides. So like I said, I don't know if that's something that went along with ray tracing. I don't know if it's necessarily an issue or if they intended it. I don't know. But either way, it threw me off. And this was not the first time, like I said, that the cockpit itself had issues with the terrain. I'm going to see if I could pull up the other video I had of it real quick. Back during demo testing, so that you could kind of see what issue we had. Maybe I didn't. Did I clip it? I may have clipped it. Okay, so here we go. I found it. So if you notice here, there's a little bit of a issue between the cockpit and the environment. So like I said, this was kind of what I was talking about, regarding the way that they have some of the graphics set up. Now this right here is demo footage. This is not actual production release footage. But like I said, I couldn't tell after seeing this in the demo and then seeing that other part, I couldn't tell if it was necessarily an issue or not. With it. So like I said, that's why I went ahead and wrote that down to kind of be like, hey, we need to look into this. This is a little weird. Next thing we're going to look into, we'll go ahead and pull up the Shadowhawk here, and we'll go in and paint it. The patterns are not crisp. They're not clean. They look rough. They look like they were spray painted on, almost. And it just it's kind of weird. It's kind of fuzzy, in some areas, and it just seems really low quality. It seems like they have a higher definition, mech that's built, but when it came to the colors and everything, it almost seems like they just slapped them on, instead of trying to make them look nice, as opposed to MechWarrior Online footage. That was definitely something that I noticed, and other people had noticed as well, was just that the clarity just was not there for it. Another thing that we ran into was enemy AI, or friendly AI. The friendly AI, if you command them, they are okay. They will attack your target. They may not attack it as aggressively as you'd like them to, but they will attack your target if you let them do their thing. They will tend to attack it themselves. Some people mentioned LRM's not working. I didn't have that issue. I had a couple of the bots run the 4J. If you have a lower skilled pilot, especially when it comes to missile systems, then you may notice that they don't know how to use them, or they're a little bit shittier at it. But I did not have that issue. I did, however, have this issue here, which you saw it on the clip earlier, but you'll see it again now. Got the high ground. I'm sitting here, stand back, trying to provide some fire support. All of a sudden, I get nailed. What the fuck just hit me, dude? The friendly AI acts as if you are not even there. There was no enemy directly around us. These enemies, as you could see based on that, reticle marker there, they're almost 500 meters away. But he tried to shoot through me to hit them because he had the range. So the AI acts, and this is just one example, but I have another example of it, to where they try to hit those targets and they don't care if you're standing there or not. And that should definitely be adjusted, for sure. Another thing which was mentioned by a lot of people was enemies spawning on top of you. I did not get some of the actual footage that I had from last night. I was walking into areas and I could see VTOLs spawning right in front of me. It wasn't like they spawned right behind me. They spawned right in front of me, like in the sky. I could see them. Like it was they just magically appeared. I had mechs spawn right in front of me. But this kind of shows real quick. If you will, go ahead and watch the radar here up on the top left, and you'll see what ends up happening. Okay, helmet here. Boom. Okay. So, you're talking less than 100 meters here. This particular enemy just spawned right in. And this is something that was brought up, and it's supposed to be addressed a little bit better with this patch as well that came out today. But we'll be keeping an eye on that as well, to see if maybe some of the enemy spawns are a little bit better than they were. Because this is just, like I said, this is just an example. This happens all the time in the game, and multiple people have reported it. So it is something that they do need to keep an eye on. Another thing that was also reported was missing HUD markers. Once again, with the HUD markers. As I was coming up here, okay, you'll notice a turret spawn. Okay, so the turret will spawn. Not only will it spawn, it'll actually shoot. Because you'll see the red lasers come out of it. Boom. Red lasers came out. That marker that you saw was the enemy behind it. The marker never came up for that turret while it was active. Now, there are better examples of this, but this has happened to a lot of streamers while they were playing. They would go and go, hey, is that an enemy? Is it dead? And then all of a sudden it would shoot at them, and they would have to kill it. The marker wouldn't even be there for them. Another issue that popped up as we were going through, once again, it's a cutscene issue. You'll notice the sun is going to spawn over here, and pay particular attention to it. Right here. For those of you that didn't see that, we'll go ahead and slow that down a little bit. You can see this right here. Whatever the fuck this is. I don't know what that is. Okay? It was there, and I've seen it a couple times. And it's on the surface of the sun that you're passing. So I don't know what that is. It's just some weird texture. I don't know if it's fucked up texture, what it is. Once again, it's just one extra little thing on here that popped up. This also happened during gameplay. So when we went to salvage, okay, the share cost for the Centurion was lower than a cicada. The value was higher than the cicada, right? So you have a higher value mech with a lower value share cost, okay? And I don't know why this happened. It should be directly correlated, right? This should not have happened. I don't know if it was something randomized that the game just screwed up on, or what the deal was, but you need to pay particular attention to this, because this should not have happened. And that Centurion was relatively complete. It was not super fucked up. So once again, you know, they may need to elaborate on this as to why this happened, but it shouldn't have happened. The Cicada 2A has 2 medium lasers and a small laser. That Centurion, I believe, has a AC-20 and LRM-10. I think the AH by default. But that was definitely an annoyance. And then back to AI real quick. We're gonna go ahead and let this. This is a little combat scene, and this is one of the storylines that happened. This is for one of the AI that's on the map inside of the campaign mission. Okay. Now we get into a fight, and he is nowhere to be seen.
They're fielding 2 medium mechs. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Let's go get them.
No, not exactly. So you can notice during this combat up here that that AI Jenner is nowhere on my radar here at all. He's not there. Okay. Now I don't notice it at the time. I'm too busy trying to kill these guys because I'm in a Centurion, and we got an assassin, and I think it was a Shadowhawk maybe that I was up against. Or was it a Griffin? It was a Griffin. Okay. So anyway, we keep going through it. Right? I end up killing the assassin. I go after the Griffin, trying to kill them. I even fall back at one point to use it. And you can see there, he is way out here. Where'd that fucking repair bay go? I was looking for the repair bay at the time. Did it just... But that guy is way the fuck over here. The battle was happening way over here. I don't know what he was doing. We have no control over that guy. I can't tell him to come over there to reinforce. He even calls out the mechs when they first drop. But for some reason, he just was nowhere to be seen. And it's like, you know, I could have easily gotten killed there because that Jenner didn't show up to help me. And I don't know why. I don't know why it did it like that. So that was kind of a, you know, another annoyance. So like I said, these were just some of the issues that we found. I tweeted at Russ and the MechWarrior 5 team and PGI that, you know, every day that I play this game, other things just will continue to pop up, and they have. These like 2, 3, 4 little things every time I stream for a couple of hours, they will pop up, and you will see them. They're going to be there. And that's the thing. Is there anything super majorly broken? Not really. Nothing that can't be fixed easily. Okay? But it's a lot of little things that add up. The other thing too, I noticed yesterday, after playing this game for about 20 hours, you're starting to feel the fatigue. You're starting to feel the grindiness, right? The story itself is not intriguing, right? Your dad dies. Then you're given command of the MechWarrior group. Yay! Now you're going to find out who killed your dad, right? But even then, the story is just not well written, and it doesn't engage you, right? Like, you don't have... Let me put it this way. I didn't have the urge to continue the story to find out what happened. I had the urge to continue the story to see if there was a story and to figure out, like, okay, how long is it? Now, I haven't finished it yet, but once again, it's not something that is blatantly apparent, when certain things are going to happen. You have sections of the campaign which literally tell you, build up your reputation, build up your forces. So you're jumping around the inner sphere trying to go to these different places. Well, then all of a sudden a campaign mission pops up, and you got to spend 500,000 C-bills to fly across the inner sphere just to get back to where that campaign mission was. Because they didn't tell you where it was going to be. Nothing. Right? And you're like, okay, well, maybe they gathered intel. No, but they don't cordon off where you can move to. You can move anywhere you want. So as a result, you run into situations like that where you're just not even following along the campaign. This game, in solo, single player co-op mode, is Battletech's career mode. Okay? With a splash of a story. That's it. It's not that big of a story. So it's Battletech's career mode. And once again, it's indefinite. So there is no time limit. It's limitless. You just continue on, right? And eventually it just gets dull because you're fighting against, certain bad guys. Eventually you're going to get, maxed out on your tonnage. You can only have 4 mechs, in your lance. Last night it was mentioned that you can only have 50 mechs inside of cold storage. So at that point, I don't even think you can get all the mechs in the game. You can't accrue them. So it just becomes that monotonous aspect of it at this point in time. Now, what does that mean? Do I regret buying the game? No. Is the game... Would I suggest somebody go out right now and buy it? No. For those who did buy it, will it be a good investment? I think so. And it's not going to be a good investment because of PGI. It's going to be a good investment because of the mods and the potential mod support, which has been talked about, if it ever gets there. The game itself as a base... I mean, even if PGI just packaged, the Unreal 4 engine and shipped it off to us to be able to use, it would be, that would be the investment, right? People will build on it. So I fully suspect if modders are out there and they do have the option to, they will continue to build on it. They will continue to make it better. And like I said, out of some of the issues that did pop up, PGI did come through and did go ahead and push out a patch. So let's see if I could bring that up again real quick. Probably not. Here we go. The first patch that came out, all right, was released today. So some of floating objects and missions, they claim they fixed it. Some of the gaps in the dropship, as I showed you, they claim they fixed it. There's certain other issues that popped up that I didn't run into, but these were issues that they felt needed to be fixed. Visible weapons, not being marked as hero, weapons mounted would appear to float. That's the one with the hunchback. But they specifically said the hunchback, so we don't know. Maybe it also happens on some of the other mechs. There's a lot of adjustments for the controls. Some of the gameplay, they said that some of the enemy spawning has been improved. Dropship spawning has been improved, supposedly. Fixed an issue with some of the story missing, faction standing not updating, things of that nature. Crash fixes, sound fixes, UI fixes, things like that. So they did make some changes. So hopefully we will continue to see PGI fix these issues and make changes to these issues, and hopefully address some of the issues that I've mentioned as well. And hopefully we will see more improvement on that. But that leads us into the last part, which really is what is going to be the future here for PGI? What is going to be the future here for MechWarrior 5 and for MechWarrior Online? One of the biggest things that I wanted to point out was that MechWarrior Online is a client server-based setup, right? PGI's hosting servers. Those servers are there for people to do online play. That's why you have 12v12, gameplay. This switched over to a P2P system, which is a step down. There is no server hosting the game. You are reliant on the host's machine and the host's internet connection and your connection to those hosts. So if somebody in the United States is hosting and somebody from across the world, let's say out of Singapore or Philippines or whatever the case is, tries to connect, they may have some issues, right? Or New Zealand, some of those Pacific areas. They may have some issues with it. Same thing goes for, being able to connect to somebody who's next door to you. They may be able to connect a little bit better and have better, a better time connecting. And that definitely comes into play with the P2P. But the other thing behind it is that it's not very expansive. Unless they really, really optimize it. P2P has never been able to support massive multiplayer online gameplay. It hasn't. It's always been a server client-based system. So even if the mods come in, you start looking at the multiplayer options, and something has to change on that front. Something has to change on that front in order to get a MechWarrior Online-like setup for MechWarrior 5. So with all these things that were coming in and some of the main key differences between MechWarrior 5 and MechWarrior Online, somebody had mentioned and they said, well, it's almost as if they built the game to fail. I wouldn't say that. They built the game so that it wouldn't compete with MechWarrior Online. And I think they have done that because the game does not compete with MechWarrior Online on a lot of the things that MechWarrior Online offers. And to be quite honest with you, in its current state, I'm sorry to say it, MechWarrior Online is a little bit better game. I would put MechWarrior Online first over MechWarrior 5, but the problem with it is that PGI stopped development on it. If PGI had continued development during this time, even if it was very slow development, that's fine, that's understandable. I understand how small studios are, but they should have continued development on MechWarrior Online, and they didn't do it. So right now, at this point, it's a little bit of a crapshoot. We'll see where it goes from here. But as far as criticizing Russ or criticizing PGI's choices or criticizing, the game itself, it speaks for itself. Russ's actions and Russ's response to things speak for themselves, right? PGI's actions and responses as a whole speak for themselves. I don't have to go out and say anything salty or bad talk them because you're going to form your own opinion based on what you see and what you experience. And like I said, in my experience, MechWarrior 5, I will not be jumping on it continuously for an extended period of time. I will be revisiting it most likely when, if there is mod support, as patches are released, if some updates and changes have been made. And obviously they have set this up for DLC. They have mentioned that as well. Also with the progression of the timeline, because there's just missing equipment. There's missing things, right? There's missing mechs, missing mech variants. There's a lot of things that do still need to be added that are in the Battletech universe, and we'll see if they choose to add them to this game. And like I said, it's really going to be, in the long term, we'll see what the success of MechWarrior 5 is. Right now, in the short term, though, I would, for those of you who waited to buy it on Steam, I think that you're going to be delivered a better game, because obviously a lot of these things are going to be worked out by PGI for the players that are playing it right now over the next year. And honestly, I think over the next year, they will be able to address a lot of the things that have popped up. But that's it. Wraps up the review. Like I said, hopefully you guys enjoy MechWarrior 5. And it is what you want it to be. All right.